So welcome everybody that's joined us today. My name is Mandy Jacobson. I'm the Group Training Manager for Frontline Recruitment Group, and joining us today we have Peter Davis, our Managing Director. And as you know, Frontline Retail is a leading provider of staffing solutions across Australia and New Zealand, specifically in the retail industry. And today we're presenting Retail Recruitment Live, which is going to be presented by our Managing Director, Peter Davis. You're also going to hear from our agency owners and managers who work across the different states to give you a little bit of an insight into what's happening in those particular states. So just before we get started and I hand you over to Pete, I just want to just share with you a bit of housekeeping. So we're going to be running through the presentation. So if you do have any questions that you want to address to Pete or any of the agency managers or owners, please type your questions in the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll address those questions after the presentation. If we run out of time to answer your questions, we'll come back to you after the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Peter Davis, our Managing Director. Over to you, Pete.
So thank you, Mandy, and thank you everyone for taking the time to attend our webinar today. The first slide here talks about flattening the curve, and of course this is the daily cases for COVID-19, and we've got Australia and New Zealand numbers here, and the reason we have this is because it really lays the platform for the rest of the presentation. Both countries, and the reason why we have New Zealand is because we have some of our New Zealand colleagues joining us today. So both countries have done an extremely good job, both governments have done an extremely good job of flattening this curve, which sort of leads us to the next curve, which is flattening the unemployment curve, which is what we want to talk about today, and we want to talk about it in the context of retail recruitment. So there has been a lot of press in both Australia and New Zealand about unemployment, and for those of you who have been able to follow it today, the unemployment rate for Australia came out today, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But plenty of press, plenty of predictions. I think the general consensus in both countries, Australia and New Zealand, is that we're going to see unemployment go over 10%, and this will be the first time we've been in that situation since the early 1990s. Frontline Recruitment Group started in the early 1990s, and we have quite a bit of experience recruiting in high unemployment. So we've taken the opportunity here today to share with everyone some of the lessons we learned back then, but also try and overlay that with some of the things that we think are going to happen post-COVID. This slide here gives us a little bit more context, talks about unemployment over the last century in Australia. As we can all see, the Great Depression in the 1930s, late 20s, early 30s, unemployment at 20%. The interesting thing to look at here is the century average, which is 4.9%. And those of us who have been in the workforce for the last 20 years will sort of be familiar with that number, because unemployment in Australia sort of hovered around that area over that period of time. That red line there is the 10% mark. As you can see there, it's only come up there, only went over 10% twice in the last century. This is New Zealand, similar-ish. Their century average is 3.8%. So in the next slide, we'll be talking about getting back to averages and how long it's going to take. So just having a little bit of context around that is important for us. Unemployment rate and recovery period. So there's a lot of talk around, we've gone into COVID really quickly and it's been lightning fast. Are we going to come out really quickly? And what does that look like? So we're just going to look at what's happened in the past when unemployment has reached above 10%. So there's a New Zealand number for us that's their unemployment rate since 1986. This is what Australia looks like, as you can see, above 10% in the early 80s and in the early 90s. This is the United States, and it's not a mistake, that blue line on the right-hand side. That is the unemployment jump in the United States. over the last month. And the final slide I've got is Canada here. And again, over 10%, early 80s, early 90s, and you can see that jump. If you just have a look at Australia, Australia is currently on 6.2% as of today. That was the number. That's actually a number that was from the 18th of April, so almost a month ago. There is some question around how they're measuring this. In very simple terms, there's around about 1.5 million people at the moment on Job Seeker, and there's about 13 million working Australians. So that would put that rate somewhere around about the 11–12% mark now, which we think is probably a more accurate reflection in terms of what we're seeing in the marketplace. So as I said, it's about recovery rates. So it took New Zealand 16 years to go from high unemployment down to where they are now. In terms of Australia, if I can just get control of my mouse again. In terms of Australia, it took them 16 years to come down as well. US from the GFC to now, 12 years, and over in Canada, 16 years again. So the reason this is, we think this is important is because, as you can see from the graphs, in all of these cases, we tended to go into a high unemployment situation relatively quickly and then take a very long time to come out. We're going to go in a lot faster this time, so there is a line of thinking which is we're going to come out a lot faster. We probably are, but nevertheless, we think we're going to be in a high unemployment recruitment situation for the next 5 years at least, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Just to back this number up that I talked about in terms of the number of job losses, the government put this graph out in Australia last week, and it talks about job losses in the different industry sectors. As we can see, accommodation and food services, almost 500,000, 441,000. Retail, 146,000. So these are really significant numbers. Around about 1.2 million people employed in retail, around about 900,000 in accommodation and food services. Some really big hits to the Australian economy and illustrated there in terms of job losses. Now, as I said, we have looked at the unemployment rate, but we've also spoken to a number of companies that we work with and a lot of the candidates we work with. And we've asked a number of questions, and we just want to feed back those survey results. And I'll do that right now. So comparison survey, Australian companies versus New Zealand companies, asking them, when do you see yourself returning to business? This survey was done 2 weeks ago, so things have changed a little bit since then. Immediately was the Australian response at the time, 41% of people, 38% 2 to 4 weeks. So that was reasonably accurate. New Zealand's just coming out, as Mandy would have said in her introduction today. So they're coming back to work today. They're going to level 2. Next question was, how do you see the return to business happening? And this was along the lines of, are you going to open all your stores straight away, or are you just going to do it in a slow, more methodical manner? Both countries, respondents in both countries are saying, look, the chances are we're going to do this reasonably slowly, if not store by store, then, probably maybe city by city. Next question was, what is your expectation around people returning to work? Are they coming back in the same role? Is the role going to be different, or is it going to be a combination of roles? Both countries, respondents in both countries, overwhelmingly saying, no, people are going to come back in the same role. There's a little bit of combination roles, and this is tended to be more around where companies had needed to let go middle management, and they foresaw the need to have some of their more senior juniors step up, and some of their more junior seniors step down and cover those middle roles. Next question was, will you bring everyone back? I think the intentions are just bring it back as many people, but the reality is that around about 64% in Australia and about 54% in New Zealand were saying, yeah, they'll bring everyone back. There was a lot of uncertainty, particularly in New Zealand, around this particular question as well. Will you need to recruit? Yes, no, not sure. So both countries, you know, Australia 22% said that they're going to need to recruit, New Zealand 11%. A lot more no's here in New Zealand than Australia, and I think that may be a reflective of the wages subsidy programs in place in the respective countries. But again, there was a level of uncertainty, rather large level in Australia. So those were the client survey questions that we got responses to. In terms of our candidates, we again asked them a range of questions, and I'll just run through those now. And these are consolidated answers across the both countries. So, which of the following best describes your situation since COVID-19 hit? So, I'm still working. Just over a third of our respondents were still working. 25% were stood down. 22% had been let go completely, and 17% were in other situations. And those other situations included some sort of restructuring, reduced hours, redundancies, stand downs, casuals, and a number of them were in a enforced annual leave scenario. So that was the cohort of candidates, and that was the circumstances they were in. In terms of what their thinking was, if you are now currently working due to stand down or loss of hours, when do you see yourself returning to work? Well, 23%, about a quarter, said that they expect immediately they'll be going back to work. And this survey was completed late last week and early this week. 2 to 4 weeks was 26%, 1 to 3 months, 20%, and others was 30%. And the others was an interesting group because with just a lot of uncertainty, firstly, whether they're going to return to work, whether they wanted to return to work in the same type of role, and the fact that they were actually starting to look for a job now. A large number of them already started that process. What is your expectation around returning to work? 23% said, yeah, I expect to come back into the same role. Just under 3% said same employer but different job. 41%, a whopping 41%, were actually out there looking for a job now. I'm still working, 18%, and other was 13%. In the other group, again, reduced hours, reduced pay, a lot of concerns about health and safety measures. This kept coming up with the surveyed group, and pretty well everyone we talked to was keeping a half an eye on the market, the candidate market. This question here, if you're looking for a new job, where will you look? Overwhelming response to that was seek.com.au. Interesting, very interesting that no one responded saying that they'd use social media as their go-to place. 21% said they'd go to a recruitment agency, and the others said they'd go to various different job boards. Some of them said networking, and some of them said that they're going to do some retraining and look at moving across industry sectors. This question here, what do you expect to see in terms of job opportunities available as we move through COVID? 13% said no change. 75%, big 75%, said harder to find a retail job. Probably a very realistic outlook. Interesting group said 5.6% going to be easier to find a retail job. And the other group of 5.6% again said, look, probably not a store-based role, maybe move into a back of office role. So there's some feedback there from both sides, so the companies we're dealing with and the candidates we're dealing with. And we're looking at that feedback. We're also looking at the unemployment rate and the fact that it is going to go over 10%. Frontline's experience in the market in dealing in that high unemployment environment, and what we think we can all expect moving forward. So based on all of that, we've listed down challenges that we think a lot of companies are going to face post-COVID when they start recruiting again. First and foremost, unqualified candidates. So there's going to be a lot more unqualified candidates in the marketplace than we've ever seen before. Anyone who's done any recruiting up until now will know that, you know, you put up a job ad, you do get a lot of unqualified candidates coming back. That number is going to go up exponentially. And recruiters just need to be aware of the extra cost involved in that, because there is a lot of cost going through all those applications. This next one, overqualified candidates. We haven't seen much of this for the last, probably for the last 20 years. And just incidentally, you know, we're in high unemployment in 1992. Here we are in 2020. Anyone who's sort of under, 42, 43 years of age probably has never had the pleasure of being in a high unemployment environment. So we're going to get, or we're predicting we're going to get a lot of pushback from overqualified candidates. Maybe not initially, but after 6 months and a level of frustration sets in with overqualified candidates, we're starting to prepare for the fact that some of these candidates are going to become quite angry, and because they simply don't understand why they're not being offered roles. Speed of process. So this sort of fits in with the first point we're making here, which is there's going to be a lot more applications, and with higher volumes, it means that you can stay, if your recruitment process is inflexible and linear. In other words, I'm not going to actually contact any of these candidates until I've gone through all the applications. If you've got 300 or 400 applications for a role, it's going to take you days to get through those. And in the meantime, you can lose some good talent that's gone elsewhere. So speed of process is going to be important. Large gaps in resumes. Look, there is a practice within recruitment that, as soon as we see a large gap on a resume, we move on to the next resume. Not so much straight away, but I think after about 6 months, a large number of candidates will have a gap on the resume. And we just need to be aware that the old practice of, putting up the red light when there's a gap on the resume, a lot of people are going to have very good reason to have the gap. And we may be overlooking some good talent if we're discounting those people out of hand. Skills gaps. So, despite the fact that there are more candidates in the marketplace, there are still going to be hard to fill roles. There's still roles which require specific skills. There are roles which require very, very good salespeople or managers. And despite the fact that there's going to be a lot more competition for roles, those people with the correct skills and the correct track records are going to still be able to demand reasonably good salaries. Providing learning facilities. This is a bit of a point from the past. With industries such as travel in particular and hospitality essentially closing down, we're already seeing a lot of people from those industries starting to try and move across into other industry sectors. Any companies who have strong onboarding programs or bridging programs to help people migrate from one industry sector to the next will find that they're in a really good position to pick up some extremely good talent out of these industry sectors at very reasonable prices. So that's one just to think about, particularly for the medium and larger size companies. Salary levels. Look, despite the fact unemployment is high, and particularly in the first 6 months post-COVID, candidates are going to want to move back to the salary levels they were on prior. The talent will be available at cheaper prices, but those people we put in and candidates will accept roles at cheaper prices, at lower salaries. However, we need to be careful that they're just not accepting the role and looking around, because that will happen if the salary is too low or if it's not put up quickly. Confidentiality. So this is something that we think will be a new feature of the post-COVID environment, and it's certainly not something that was an issue in the early 90s. except for the fact that it was more the companies in the early 90s who wanted to keep the roles confidential. We think the candidates, and because there's just a general knowledge across society now about keeping your information confidential. So particularly as candidates become frustrated in the recruitment process that they're not getting roles, we think that there could be quite a bit of pushback. So at this stage, we're just saying to, you know, particularly ourselves, but all the companies we work with, make sure that we have specific permission to store candidate information. Most of that permission runs out once the job is filled. So we've got to be prepared to remove candidates from databases and have practices in place where we can show we can do that. The other thing we think probably will happen is that there'll be a requirement for encrypted emails, maybe not initially, but probably a year down the track. This point here, managing your social media risk. Again, I'll link this back to frustrated candidates. And we think that, again, candidates who aren't treated with compassion and empathy and understanding throughout the job seeking process that they're on, they could become quite angry in this process. And it's very easy just to jump on social media, as everyone would appreciate, and negatively impact brands. The final point I want to make here is internal recruitment teams. So over the last 10 years, we've really seen a steady move towards a higher level of sophistication in internal recruitment teams. Now, those teams need that level of sophistication because last 10 years it's been about finding candidates. Now it's about going to be about processing large volumes of applications. So it's not just the finding candidates, it's the conversation that we have to have with the candidate after we've found them. And that is quite a high level, mature conversation. Whereas we're now going to go back into receiving quite a few resumes, and it's going to be more important to process them quickly. So we just see a corresponding change happening with internal recruitment teams. So that's 10 points that we've raised. There are a number of others. There is a sleeper point here that we haven't mentioned, which is mental health, and we'll tackle that in a subsequent webinar. But at the moment, these are 10 points that we have. That's based on where we think unemployment's going to go, what we think is going to happen with unemployment after COVID, what our clients are saying to us, and what our candidates are saying to us. So thank you very much, and I will hand back to you, Mandy, and we'll move through our agencies.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete. Really appreciate that insight. What we'll do now is I'm going to start moving through the different states, and I'm going to hand over now to Richard Easton, the agency owner for Sydney Retail.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Thanks, Pete. So look, from client feedback that we've received over the last couple of weeks, you know, and what we know that essential services have remained quite strong within the retail industry, including supermarket, FMCG, pharmacies, outdoor lifestyle, hobby and games, as well as fresh food, including butchers. Majority of the CB stores were closed during the COVID-19 period, and it was Sydney experienced some lockdown, including the large format and department stores. Most retailers, including fashion retailers, have commenced operations and have started coming back into the market from around about the 4th of May. Retailers are staggering their openings, choosing to open suburban stores first. We've also seen some retailers announce daily to their customers on social media on which store will be opening the following day. Some retailers have taken the option to re-engage stood-down employees on JobKeeper, with the doors still closed to complete stock takes and refit stores if any refurbishments were carried out. We have seen that the furniture retail has still traded with minimal disruptions, with some retailers experiencing strong sales due to the home office setups. We've also seen limited or no future immediate needs in recruitment of new staff. Talent acquisition teams have definitely seen an increase of applications, which is also having an effect on the time taken to shortlist suitable candidates. Generally, though, the overall feeling is quite positive, and I look forward to working with very closely with all our Sydney clients as we adjust to working in this new world of work. Thanks, Mandy.
Excellent, Richard. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that insight into what's happening in the Sydney market. We're going to move over now to Jennifer Stewart, our agency owner for Retail Executive in Sydney, just to find out what's happening in the executive space in the Sydney market. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. So just following on from what Richard said, definitely pharmacies, the supermarkets, electrical, DIY have all stayed open through the months of March, April and May with new WHS measures in place. Furniture retailers started to reopen at the end of April and fashion started the first week of May. And they were very specific about what stores they did open, geographically located and not in the CBD. Many more of those stores started to open this week. Head offices are starting to return with distancing in place and there seems to be a team A and B going in and working out that distancing. Retailers are also summing up the leases they're going to be walking away from in some of these shopping centres with the lift of online sales. There is definitely a shift of exploring new roles such as call centres and also online digital. What my prediction would be, certainly with the change of people working in offices within CBD locations, I certainly think we're going to see a very different landscape within the shopping centres and you know, perhaps less tenancies and turning of tenancies within those shopping centres. Thank you.
Great, Jen. Thank you so much. We're heading over now to Northern New South Wales and we've got Mel Savelle. Mel, going to give us some insight into what's happening up in Northern New South Wales.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Well, first, I actually want to let everyone know that I've actually been heading out into some of the local centres in my territory, and I'm going to use the word buoyant. People out there are feeling very excited about being back at work, which is fantastic. And I just love the word buoyant. So I think we're moving in a really positive direction. General retailing, so things like your hardware stores, furniture, homewares, we've actually seen increased sales and we're not adversely affected by COVID-19. A lot of the teams in those businesses, due to the increase in sales, they've actually not been able to onboard new starters. So they've used their staff that they've currently got. And for example, they've moved their casuals into a full-time role. And they may need to recruit as things return to the new normal. Fashion has really started to open up in this area, and they've obviously started with staggered openings with minimal staff numbers. The expectation on the team members returning to work are on the JobKeeper hours and obviously grow from there. Everyone will be back unless decisions are made that the store is best suited to close for good. And look, at this stage, there's no need to recruit until the clients out there determine what the market is going to be doing. The other thing that I've noticed in my area is that there's been some people issues, and HR and operations have had to deal with that. And that really is, in general, people not feeling safe and or people not wanting to come back to work yet. And if they do come to work, what are the conditions? So all in all, I think that it's obviously going in the right direction. In regards to my prediction with recruitment, I think that regional candidates are quite cautious in making a change. So going from one job to another, they don't move as fast as metro candidates. And I actually think it's going to be a lot harder to get those quality candidates to make the move. And obviously, being in regional areas, we always get hit with high levels of applications and a big percentage of those unskilled or not suitable. And I think that will actually get, worse, and the volumes there will increase. So processing time and getting through those candidates is going to take a lot longer. Thanks, guys. And over to you, Mandy.
Thanks, Mel. Appreciate that. And it's good to hear that there's some buoyancy happening in the region. So watch the space.
Very exciting.
We'll head over now to the ACT and Southern New South Wales and welcome Gemma Demardi, our agency owner in the ACT.
Thanks, Mandy. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. ACT and Southern New South Wales local retailers adapted quickly to adhere to the requirements, and with some out-of-the-square implementations have been able to trade over the last 63 days. Some of these practices have been so well received, they will be maintained as we move to stage 3 and possibly beyond. Figures from the CBA on Tuesday indicated a 7% decline in retail trade for the ACT for the month year on year. We are expecting to see this lift slightly over the next few months as government sectors return to their offices and our national brands have reopened, bringing purchases back in store and off online. Areas of focus and recruitment issues currently are store teams are craving support and reassurance, from managing the standard bricks and mortar issues to the COVID safe requirements that affect not only their operational practices, but team morale as well. Trading hours and changes to consumer purchasing habits, the COVID safe app, budgets, and our beautiful weather with its flu season. I managed to experience a delightful 4 degrees at my place on Tuesday, are all topics under discussion and will make up some of the key drivers behind staff retention or lack of. The opportunity for change is a phrase that will be embraced across my region. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks, Gemma. Excellent. We're heading over now to Victoria and the Tasman area. So I'm going to hand you over to Heidi Payne, our agency manager in the Victoria area. Over to you, Heidi.
Thanks, Mandy. Hi, everybody. Look, just in regards to the Vic region, there have been some differences between the metro and the regional areas, but overall, we've found that telecommunications and furniture have remained the strongest. It's been great talking to some of the telco and, the telco businesses and candidates. You know, some of them have recorded some very big sales and have had some record months. Furniture, they've done really well in terms of the fact they've adapted to the situation. So by doing appointment only, doing online sales, as well as finding the serious shopper. It was interesting to hear that some of the fashion and streetwear retailers more targeting the youth brands, their sales have remained. So the younger demographic customer that we've got hasn't changed their habits and they're still shopping. We've had some excellent news when talking to our retailers also that they're still proceeding with store openings. So before the end of the calendar year is out, we should see new stores, new openings within some of the major centres, which will mean new opportunities for candidates as well. Overall, the majority of retailers, as we can see, are opening up every day. This is building confidence for everybody. In regards to how it's going to happen, it will be slow, so taking small steps and watching the market and making decisions from there. At the moment, we're noticing with our candidates especially, there's a lot of confidence building, especially around the fact that stores are opening, jobs are coming back up on their job boards, and more opportunities are coming to them as we speak as well. Overall, I've found the vibe is really positive, and that's what retail is about. We're all very positive for the good things. Everyone's watching each other, trying to make sure they make the right move at the right time. I guess moving forward, what I can see happening is that there will be a big difference between the metro recruitment as well as the Vic recruitment. In regional Victoria, we've noticed that there's been less COVID-19 cases, less outbreaks, therefore they've remained a lot more stable in terms of our industry. Metro, they've had higher restrictions there, as we know, have had a lot more outbreaks and COVID cases. So I feel that their recruitment will be a little bit more cautious. So taking their time, making sure they bring on the right people at the right time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate you sharing all that information regarding, Victoria and the Tasman. We'll head over now to Queensland. Thanks. And I'm going to hand you over to Colleen Hart, the agency owner for Brisbane.
Thank you, Mandy. Hello, all. We've got a magnificent day here in the Sunshine State. It's a beautiful 29. I'll just rub that in, Gemma. There's not a huge amount of unique information for the Brisbane market versus the southern states, but I'll give you what I've got from my clients and candidates and a bit of my own observation. Brisbane, unlike some southern states, had relaxed rules early May. Media reports suggest that the state maintained social distancing compliance well, and so we were out and about enjoying the sunshine. There's only 63 remaining active cases across the state, so we haven't been as largely as affected as our southern peers. Like our southern peers though, our clients are starting to reopen. We've had a lot of clients reopen in the last 2 weeks, most gradually, most like everybody else with employees on JobKeeper. Unfortunately, a lot of casuals didn't make it back, but I believe they're sitting in the wings waiting. The brands that remain closed at the moment are mostly international, and there's talk that will reopen at month end, May month end, so that's exciting. Some small retail clients, particularly boutique, did not have online options, so they pivoted and adapted quickly to get online up and running. Brisbane saw a bit of a boom in pharmacy initially, given the pandemic, but that was only for about a month or so. But supermarket, including independents, and home improvement retailers completely were unaffected, and in fact are thriving. The primary customer has both the time and the weather conditions to home renovate and repair. If you drive around Brisbane, you're going to see somebody working on something on the house. Last weekend was exciting. Historically, Mother's Day trade for retail is huge and important. And many of our clients reported back that they were delighted with the result, and that's really exciting. Like Mel Savelle, I've done a lot of shopping, out and about in our major centres to see what's going on. And I'm actually really thrilled about a buzz that I've witnessed there. Our retail frontline brand ambassadors themselves, they're smiling. There's a real appreciation to be back open. They feel like they're home. They're back within their brands that they love, the businesses that they love, and in their roles. And they seem to be very grateful. And I believe we'll see a more motivated brand ambassador serving the client moving forward. Complacency sets in easily, and I think that this has been a bit of a shake-up. Sometimes you don't know what you've got until it's gone mentality, and I think that will serve the retailer terrifically. So thanks from the Sunshine State. Thanks, Mandy.
Excellent. Thanks, Colin. Thank you. It's encouraging to hear that there's a buzz. I'm going to hand you over now to our regional Queensland and Northern Territory agency owner, Rory Manwaring, and he's also going to share some information on South Australia as well, as he has both agencies. So over to you, Rory.
Thanks, Mandy. During COVID-19, essential services like pharmacy, home improvement, telecommunications and supermarket services all skyrocketed. However, we have seen them return to normal. We had regional locations remain open or turn into dark stores, to which they pulled stock out of their bricks and mortar stores to meet the online sales demand. Cairns and Gold Coast markets remain cautious due to both locations having coronavirus outbreaks. Most retailers in the Northern Territory are reopened or remained open. Retailers are starting to become concerned about having their borders closed for an extended time due to needing out-of-state customers to help meet sales budgets. Queensland and Northern Territory retailers have a positive outlook on the future. South Australia is definitely moving in the right direction. Very low cases within this place. Schools have reopened, however, borders remain closed. Retailers are starting to open their doors with the help of JobKeeper. Some are limiting their hours. We saw strong Mother's Day sales. Retailers in South Australia have a positive outlook in the marketplace. With strong online sales, they hope to keep momentum going by offering sales to drive customers into their bricks and mortar stores. Over to you, Mandy.
Great. Thanks, Rory. Appreciate that. Sounds like, again, encouraging signs in the Adelaide Territory. So nice. Excellent. Thank you. We'll head over to the west of Australia now, to Western Australia, and I'm going to hand you over to Alana Brown, our agency owner in Perth. Over to you, Alana.
Thanks, Mandy, and welcome everyone. So much the same as everyone else, essential services and its selected specialty retailers continue to trade through March, April and May, and they all perform very well. Fashion retailers have started to reopen as of May 1st. The majority chose to open stores in Carousel, Booragoon and the CBD to test the market, and are still currently reopening their remaining stores. The majority of retailers did want to be trading for Mother's Day and have been very pleasantly surprised with the trade. Candidates and clients both commented it felt like Christmas, which is great news. Our centre managements have been doing a really good job on their social media platforms to advertise the stores that are reopening, and I guess some of the deals they've got going. Most retailers have retained their permanent workforce with JobKeeper, and team members have returned to work on reduced hours, generally around 10 to 5, 10 to 4, and are doing 4-day work weeks. This will be reviewed regularly depending on how sales go. Not all companies have chosen to bring back their casual team workforce at this point in time, and as expected, there has been some restructures and redundancies made, and poor performing stores may not open at all. Overall, candidates are very excited to return to work, particularly those companies who maintain their engagement through the stand down period, through special projects, online training, and ongoing communication. Retail has definitely opened differently in line with social distancing rules and work health and safety. Police are completing walkthroughs in major shopping centres such as the DFO and the CBD to ensure customers and retailers are following the distancing guidelines. Again, like everywhere else, the majority of retailers aren't recruiting until they see what the market does do. The only exception seems to be those who are trying to fill roles that were available prior to COVID-19. And there has been a small amount of advertising for Karen Up Stage 2, which is due to open in late this year. There's only 7 active cases in WA, which is great. And so as of Monday the 18th, we'll move to Stage 2, with the major point of difference being we will be allowed to have gatherings of up to 20 people, which will see hospitality opening their doors again. In WA, much the same as everywhere else, candidates will be hard to find. We typically do have 3 times more applicants on Seek as opposed to other states. But look, people will move jobs, they will just take more convincing. And yeah, I look forward to working with you. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks, Alana. It's good to hear that you're moving to Stage 2. Unlike New Zealand, we're going down and you guys are moving up in stages. So sometimes it gets a little confusing, but it's good to hear that hospital will be opening and retail sounds encouraging. So thank you. Right, guys, so look, thank you so much. We'll go ahead now and take some questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them up into the question box and I'll address those. Pete, we did have 1 or 2 questions that have popped up already. So one of the questions I've got is that with 41% of candidates stating that they're looking for a job and unemployment set to rise, how do we attract good retail candidates given there are so many candidates in the market?
Yes, that is a good question, because it's really around how do we find those good candidates in and amongst all the candidates who are applying, all those unqualified candidates. And I think there's probably 2 things. Firstly is we've got to change, we have to change our thinking around some of the job ads that we are putting up. In the past, we've been putting up job ads trying to attract as many people in as we can. There will be some jobs where we want to do the opposite, and we want to really channel our applicants as much as we can. So with that, there's 2 things. Firstly, the specifications in the job ad become more important, and there's a lot of information on that. There's a lot of studies around this, and there's a lot of studies around how different genders, male and female, react when there's specifications in job ads. So that's one thing. The other is pre-screening. So most of the large job boards have pre-screening facilities, and I think they were introduced probably 10 or so years ago. They haven't been appropriate because we want to attract as many applications as we can. But now if we're sort of moving the other way, using pre-screening questions via the job boards is another way of really reducing those number of applications and qualifying them much more. So those would be the 2 things that I would say, Mandy.
Okay, great. One of the other questions that's been raised is, you mentioned that confidentiality will be more important than ever before. Is one of the points. Can you explain a little bit more about that and why you think that is the case?
Candidates will become much more protective of their roles. I think Alana was just talking about that as well. And if they're applying for roles, and they will be much more aware and conscious that their information is out there. The risk they take, of course, is that if their employer finds that they're applying for other roles, there is the temptation to have that conversation with the candidate and say, you know, what's going on, start the process of moving that person out of the business. So if your information, you know, as a candidate's information is compromised, there's a lot at stake. There's more at stake for them now. So if that circumstance occurs and the candidate becomes angry, well then companies who haven't taken the necessary steps to protect that information could find themselves in a little bit of bother.
Right. Got another one here that's just popped up. So considering that 75% of candidates say it's going to be harder to find a job from the survey, and with so many unqualified candidates in the market, how do you think we can find the most experienced and available candidates?
Oh, look, that's pretty easy, Mandy. I think just use a recruiter.
Of course, there's no other answer. Absolutely. All right, and I've got there's one more question that's just popped up, which is with candidates stating that they're looking for a job and unemployment set to rise. We're talking about how to attract those good retail candidates specifically, given that there are so many candidates in the market right now. How do they attract the retail, you know, the good retail experience candidates?
Is this in relation to the volume of candidates, or is this in relation to finding a particular candidate?
The question is, if the candidates that are looking for a job and that are unemployed, and unemployment is set to rise, there's going to be more candidates in the market from what I can understand. How do we attract good retail candidates, given there are so many candidates that are going to be applying for jobs? How do you tap into those retail candidates, from what I can understand the question?
Yeah, look, I think again, it goes back to being more specific. You know, whether we want to call it job advertising or pre-screening, but in that first step of candidate attraction, because you know, obviously we're going to get people out of say travel and hospitality applying for a lot of retail roles. Putting candidates through a little bit more of a process at the front end. So firstly, the job ad, and I understand that everyone can, you know, anyone can reply to the job ad, but then the pre-screening becomes very important. And the more effort you see a candidate put into pre-screening, and the more specific they are in their answers to pre-screening, can help you. So as a recruiter, you can actually start by looking at the pre-screening questions and then go to the resumes, rather than go to the resumes and then the pre-screening.
I think that answers the question. Excellent. We don't seem to have any other questions. If anybody else has another question that you want to put into the chat box, happy to answer that. Otherwise, Pete, I'll hand over to you if there's anything from a wrap-up perspective that you'd like to say.
Okay. Firstly, thanks, Mandy. Thanks to all of our agency owners and managers who've been involved, and of course, thank you to everyone who's listened in to today. This is really, I suppose, more than anything else, our opinion of what's going to happen in the marketplace. We do think unemployment is going to stay high for probably about 5 years, and it really flips recruitment on its head a little bit. And as we move through this process, I think that we're going to see a lot of change in the behaviour of our candidates. I don't think that change is going to be immediate, because I think that people will need to have some experience and get used to what's going on in front of them. But we are going to see that change, and we just need to be aware that that change will happen and be aware of the things that we can do. Hopefully we'll have some more of these as we get to the information. And again, just like to thank everyone and wish everyone a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete, and thank you everybody for attending, and we look forward to having you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.